guys again, we have to do this with every panel that we're doing. Please, when you come up to ask questions, you can't talk specifics about certain things because of the actors' strike. So better to know that in advance and maybe ask a different kind of question or come at it a different way if you can rather than specifically. Thank you. Everybody, Mr. George Takei.
Sea of empty seats here up front when you're all packed over there? Why? Who can answer that question?
They're out for lunch? I don't know.
Wouldn't you rather be up close? Come on down. There's no reason to leave these desirable seats.
But if the people whose seat it is come back, please move.
But there's no reason why.
Well, there are assigned seats, so.
Oh, assigned seats?
Yes.
Well, until they come, sit there and fill it. We actors like.
Always the rebel, George.
Seats right in front.
Always the rebel. All right. So, George, as a child, who were your heroes? Who did you look up to?
It depends on when, as a child. How young, how old.
Let's start at 10 years old.
10 years old, my father was my hero, because up to that point, most of you may know, but I grew up imprisoned in American prison camps because of this face. When Pearl Harbor was bombed, this nation overnight went crazy. American citizens of Japanese ancestry were assaulted on the sidewalk, yelled at, spat at, and attacked simply because we looked like this. Pearl Harbor, we looked like the people that bombed Pearl Harbor. That was the only reason. But the crazy thing is we had absolutely nothing to do with Pearl Harbor. And yet, this country went crazy. And the government got swept up in that too. They came down with a curfew. We had to be home by a certain time, by 8 o'clock, and stay home until 6 in the morning. I didn't care as a child because we were in bed anyway. My mother put us to bed. But young people that wanted to go out could not go out. They were arrested if they were out on the street. And the next day, my parents went to the bank to make a deposit or a withdrawal, and they discovered that our bank account was frozen, that it was closed. The government took our money. So my father's business was destroyed. We had a mortgage. He couldn't make the mortgage payment, and so we didn't make the payment, and because they said, we're going to be taken away. And the bank didn't bother us until the soldiers came in. And I remember that morning, it was a terrifying morning. My father came into the bedroom I shared with my brother, dressed hurriedly, and he told us to play in the living room, and there's nothing to do. So my brother and I was standing by the front window, just gazing out at the neighborhood. And suddenly, we saw 2 soldiers marching up our driveway. They carried rifles with shiny bayonets on them. They stomped up the porch, and the steps were right in front of our window, and they started banging on the front door with their fists. My father came out, answered the door, and they pointed the bayonet at my father. Henry and I were petrified. And the soldier said, "Get your family out of this house." My father handed my brother and me boxes that they had prepared and tied in twine, so we carried them, and we followed my father. We carried 2 heavy suitcases out and stood on the driveway waiting for our mother to be to come out. And when she came out, escorted by one of the soldiers, she had our baby sister in one arm and a huge heavy duffel bag in the other, and tears were streaming down her cheeks. I was 5 years old at the time. I will never forget that. And because we were in prison for 4 years, 4.5 years after that, in 3 different camps, we were first taken to Santa Anita Racetrack, where our family was assigned a horse stall, still pungent with the stink of fresh horse manure, insects skittering around on the ground, flies buzzing, spiders coming down. My baby sister promptly got sick, and a few days after that, I got sick too. But that was temporary. The camps were being built. And after about 4 months, they told us that we would be moving again. And we discovered they didn't tell us where we were going. We were put on a train, and they had soldiers at both ends of each car, like we were criminals. And it was a journey of 3 days and 2 nights. And most of the journey was through dry, dusty desert of the Southwest, from Los Angeles through Arizona, New Mexico. Texas was forever and a day. And then by the 3rd morning, the landscape changed. There was, we started to see plants, and then we saw pools of black water with huge trees rising out of that water. The roots of the tree went in and out of the water. It was a fascinating, magical place that we were going to. You know, Henry and I were Southern Californian kids. We'd never seen anything like that. And then the soldiers started rolling up and down the aisle. To me, they sounded like lions. They were going roar, roar, roar. I thought they were trying to scare us by roaring. Actually, they were announcing that we were approaching our camp. The camp is called Camp Rohr, R-O-H-W-E-R. And the way they pronounced it, it sounded like roar, roar, roar. And then the train started to slow down, and then we started seeing barbed wire fences. And then we saw hordes of masses of Japanese people just standing there looking up at the train. We had arrived at the camp. My father, when we asked, when we left Santa Anita Racetrack, we asked him where we were going. He said, he thought for a while, and he told us, we're going for a long journey for a vacation in the country. Barbed wire fences, I didn't think that would be our vacation spot, but that's what it turned out to be. And that was to be our home, Camp Rohr, behind barbed wire fences. And I began school for the first time in one of the black tar paper. There were rows and rows and rows of black tar paper barracks. And we were assigned a unit in one of those tar paper barracks. And I began school in a tar paper barrack. And on the very first day, the teacher came in and said, I'm going to teach you the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. and she pointed to the flag at the front of the classroom. And she said, you will memorize that, and we will begin every day with the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. So I remember every morning saying, with liberty and justice for all, when I can look out the classroom window and see barbed wire fence, sentry towers, soldiers glaring down from the sentry towers. That was and the camp was in the swamps of southeastern Arkansas. And there, the people there are all either depressed or seething with contained anger, or just, forlorn. And my father spoke both Japanese and English fluently, and so he was elected the block manager. And he sensed that we needed to develop a community in our block. The camp was divided into blocks, and each block had a block manager to represent the people of those blocks, and meet with the camp command and come down with the orders that they came down with, which my father announced at the mess hall after the meals. And my father felt that we needed to develop a sense of community, and so he built a baseball diamond. My father used to play baseball in San Francisco, and so that brought a sense of community. We went to root for my father. Usually, back in his days when he was with a baseball team that played other Japanese American teams in the Bay Area, he was in San Francisco. He played with the Palo Alto Japanese American baseball team, San Jose, Oakland, Berkeley, so forth. And so we all went to cheer for our father whenever he pitched, or others came to cheer for their brother or their cousins, and that started to build a sense of community. But I'm going off. Your original question was what?
Oh, it was 15 minutes ago, I don't remember. It was, who was your hero when you were 10 years old?
Oh,
the answer is
my
your dad.
father.
All right, so you are a practicing Buddhist. What kind of peace does your faith bring you?
It's going to be difficult to explain Buddhism. First of all,
You don't have to explain Buddhism. I just want to know what it brings you. Does it give you a sense of calm? Does it give you a sense of what the future holds?
it's an understanding. Most of you believe in a God who created everything, and he's the benign force. Buddhism is a pantheistic philosophy. It's not, a religion with a God. It's a philosophy of life, and it sees us as part of the larger whole. I remember in Sunday school, this was after the war, when we were released, and our family is, my parents were in a mixed marriage, where they were both from Buddhist families, but Buddhism has sects. My father came from a Zen family, and my mother was a Shin family. Because it was right after the war, we were dependent on volunteer transportation. And my mother's family side, the Shin Buddhists, provided volunteer car service to Sunday school. And so we went to the Shin Buddhist temple. There's a Zen Buddhist temple, but I don't think they have volunteers from our neighborhood. And so we went to the Shin temple. And to kind of put in a capsule, the Buddhist philosophy, I remember in Sunday school, the teacher said, imagine a vast ocean, and there are many forces that play on the ocean. The wind, the current, the heat, or the cold, and the tide, and that produces a wave. And at one point, little whitecaps form at the tip of the wave, and we are that whitecap saying, I am an individual, I have an ego, I am intelligent. But that whitecap lasts only for a brief moment. And then the same forces that created that whitecap starts to go back into the larger whole of the ocean. And we become a part of the water, or maybe a fish gulps us and another part is becoming the fish, or a part of the corals and so forth. That's what our existence is like. It's a brief moment in time, and we're made up of all of what makes us, these atoms and molecules, and it becomes part of a larger whole. So once you pass, you're buried in the ground, tree root might suck a part of you up, and you become part of that tree, and a part of a leaf, and the leaf might blow away and be swept up and go into the trash, or it might be eaten by a bird, and a bird makes its dropping, and we're part of that. And so we're a part of this vast system of forces, and we're part of that. And you and are certainly a different person from the one that I met decades ago. When Star Trek first started, and we met at a Star Trek convention. Mm-hmm. I remember you had a lot of
hair.
I was going to say particles. And you've lost that particle.
They've gone in the Buddhist ecosystem.
Part of your hair particles have all now become part of the larger world.
Somebody's got them.
And so on. And so that's my Sunday, Thursday afternoon Sunday school lecture.
There you go. I've got a photo. Can we get that photo up, if you can? I think you should be able to see it over here if we can get it. There's a monitor in front of you, George. So that photo, so I was a college kid at SUNY Albany, and I asked George if he would do an interview with me for my college newspaper, Albany Student Press, The Ask, and he said, sure, do you jog? I said, yes. Total lie, look at me, I don't jog. I didn't then, I don't now. But he said, meet me outside the hotel, we'll run, we'll come back in, and we'll do an interview. So that's exactly what we did. A year and a half, 4 or 5 years later, I brought George into New York for an event. We were lighting the Citicorp building in Manhattan as the world's largest illuminated American flag. If you look in Guinness Book of World Records from 1988, it's in there. And I said to George, would you do this for me? He said, I will do it for free. You don't need to pay me. Just get me a hotel room. But can you bring my friend Brad with me? And I said, of course. I mean, you were doing us a favor. We're not going to say no, right? So we got first class tickets. We got the limousine for George and Brad. And Brad was your friend at the time. How have things evolved for the LGBTQ plus community. See where I brought this? Full circle, right? Because back then, he couldn't say, hey, I'm bringing my boyfriend, can we go? Now, you wouldn't think twice about saying that sentence. So how far have we come, and how far do we still have to go?
We've come a long ways from then, haven't we? Yes, we've come a long way, baby. All of us. Brad was my friend for a long, long time. And as a matter of fact, he's still my friend after 37 years. 15, he's been my very legal friend. We got married in 2008 when in California we finally got married with one of us. But back then when we knew, well, we met for the first time, Brad, we were good friends. I met Brad for the first time. I was a member of a running club, a gay running club in Los Angeles. And we met in different places in Los Angeles, at a reservoir or by the beach or at Griffith Park. And we all ran together on weekends. The members were all from different backgrounds. Some were in the professions, others were, well, Brad was a journalist at that, but he wasn't a member when I was a member of the running club, a gay running club. And actually I was in a relationship with the president of our running club, a lawyer, and at each one of the runs, he would introduce the new member. And when I first joined, I was very skittish about that. That was the first gay organization that I became a part of, because I loved running. From my high school days, in high school I was on the track team in the summer season, and in the winter season I was on the cross-country team that ran up through the Hollywood Hills. And so running was my passion. And because it was such a strong part of me, I said, you know, I've been closeted and very discreet about my my gay life, but I'm going to take the chance joining an organization. And when I joined, Darryl was the name of the president. He asked, he came up to me and said, "Oh, what's your name?" We have a tradition of introducing new members to everybody. And I said, "Well, I'm going incognito, so you don't have to introduce me." And he said, "You don't have to be so coy. They all recognize you." People were whispering, and I heard "Sus," you know, the similar sign. They all recognize you, so tell me your name. And so I told them, I'm George. I didn't give them my last name. And so I was introduced as George. And we all became friends, and they were all closeted too, so there was no big thing about being closeted. And they understood, especially for me being in a publicly visible career, they respected that. And then one day, we gathered at Silver Lake Reservoir, and there was a new guy that was going to join us, and the same president got his name, and he introduced this new runner. I noticed him immediately, slim, tight-muscled, and gorgeous. And he really was a good runner. He was a front runner. The name of the club was Front Runners Los Angeles. And I thought I'd start a conversation with him while jogging, which is what we always do. But the line becomes a very long line. The real good runners are way up front, and I was about middle. And some of the Star Trek fans who recognized me tried to run with me, but they couldn't keep up with me, so they fell back, and they were in the tail end of our line. And I thought I'd run with this great, gorgeous new member, and I just could not keep up. He kept going faster and faster, and he turned out to be literally the front runner. He was at the very front, and when the run ended, I was huffing and puffing, and he was already strolling about, and I started a conversation with him, and I said, what do you do? And he said, I'm a journalist. And I said, oh, and what kind of journalism? Well, he said, I am a trade publication journalist, and I have to travel to visit all these home care businesses throughout the country. I just got in from Alaska. And he said, oh, I said, I've been to Alaska. Actually, I've been there something like about a half a year before then. For what else? A Star Trek convention in Fairbanks. And because it was Alaska, it's such a fascinating place, I took my 7-year-old nephew, and he really enjoyed that because we extended after the convention, and we went fishing and went on a tour through the Muskeg area. And Scotty said to everybody back home, Uncle George took me on the best trip ever in my whole life. His whole life was 7 years. And so I mentioned that to Brad, and he said, oh yeah, I was in Alaska last week at Fairbanks. And that's where our conversation began.
And it's never ended.
At that time I was on the board of the Los Angeles Theater Center, and one of the things I like to do is organize theater parties from other groups for the theater to support them. And I announced at the announcement of the meeting is I'm organizing a theater party for all my sons, Arthur Miller's play, and all those that want to go, let me know, and I'll take your name and make appropriate reservations. Well, Brad came to me and said, I'd be happy to volunteer to help you. And I said, oh, thank you very much. And it turned out he was very organized. Before not too long, he had a spreadsheet, and he had all the people that wanted to go listed, and who had paid and who hadn't paid yet, and how many in each group. And I was impressed by his volunteerism and his organization, and things grew from there. And
Here we are.
here we are.
Guys, because George has given such short answers to my answer, I'm going to open this up right now to questions, and I'm just going to throw away the rest of my pile of questions. Let's go to my mic.
What you have there.
Yeah, you can take one. Okay, go ahead.
George, during the 1960s, you were playing a beloved.
You're right.
Oh, hi.
You were in the 1960s. You were playing a beloved character, the one that we all know and love, and you had to take an extended break from playing that character while the material for the character went to others to work with John Wayne for a while. Now, we don't get do-overs in life, but if you had a do-over, would you have wanted to, play all the material that you missed, all the shows or the material you missed, and be with that character? Or are you satisfied just having missed time with that character and working with John Wayne?
My real druthers is I would like to have had both, because I'm a political activist and I lobby for a lot of issues or candidates, but I also am a lobbyist for my career, and I noticed in the first season that Leonard was always coming up with ideas during rehearsals, and that fattened up his part. Like the Spock pinch was Leonard's invention, or the Vulcan greeting was Leonard. The script had him offering a hand to an alien delegation, and he said, "No, that's illogical. We don't know anything about these aliens, and they don't know about us, and it's a very aggressive movement to offer a hand. So we should have something a bit more neutral and respectful." And he said, in the Jewish faith, we have this gesture in our ceremonies, and what do you think about this? And the director loved it. It was respectful, empty palm, and a very welcoming sign. And so I saw how Leonard was lobbying and coming up with ideas, and so I started doing that too, to beef up my part, suggesting that Sulu had a family, or that Sulu was reputed to be the #1 graduate from Starfleet Academy, and so that should be reflected in some of his activities. And he said, what was the question?
Would you work with John Wayne if you had it to do
Oh.
again, or do you be on Star Trek so you had more to do?
Oh, well, as a result of my lobbying, Gene had, he said, we have 2 leads that we've got to develop, and there's some tension there, so we've got to focus on him. But yes, I'm thinking of the whole cast, and your role will be developed. And when I went off to do Green Berets on location, during the hiatus, it was a legitimate hiatus. The first season filming had come to an end, and he said, "I have a gift for you." Gene Roddenberry said, "I have a gift for you," and he handed me 5 scripts, and they did have interesting things for Sulu to do, and so with that I went off. But the shoot was very, very troubled. We were a little delayed, and then we had rain that went on forever and a day, and so we had started shooting when it wasn't raining, and when it rained and it seemed like it was going to continue, we switched to rain, and then we started filming in the rain, and of course, wouldn't you know, the rain stopped, but we had more scenes, and we had established the rain, so we had to muddy down the set, and the actors had to submit to a dousing by buckets of water before we began the scene. And so we were very delayed, and I couldn't be back. I was scheduled to be back for the beginning of the 2nd season, and I couldn't be back for it, and I got delayed, and that's when Walter was brought in with the character Chekhov, and he got all the lines that were written for me, for Sulu. And so I came back, sight unseen, actor unseen. I was seething at the actor who got my lines. But if you read To the Stars, you know how I first met Walter, and we eventually became friends. Mm-hmm. I have a tendency to ramble.
No. All good. Let's go. Do you want me to cut you off if you're going too long? I don't want to. That's right. That's fine. I'm just going to let you roll, my friend. I don't know. Did he answer your question? Sort of. Sort of. To my left. That way, George.
Hello, George. Hi, over here.
Hello.
Thank you for coming. I love you recounting your time when you were in the internment camps. I love that history. I love the way you really give us a real, true, honest depiction of what was going on. There are a lot of states in our country now that are trying to, for lack of a better term, whitewash our history. And I'm wondering, do you think we should just tell all the aspects of our history, some of the gritty and some of the not nice parts of our history, or should we try to mask it to make some people feel comfortable?
Thank you for that question, because it's very relevant to our times today. I have been writing about my childhood in prison because I very sincerely believe that it is an important part of American history. It's not just Japanese American history. It was the Constitution of the United States, our legal process, due process, that was egregiously violated because of the terror of Pearl Harbor. But the reaction to this country was not for national security, but just to take off on the terror and the racism. I've been writing about it because I felt that it is an important part of our history that we should all know about, and our education hasn't been delving into that chapter of American history. So I wrote about it in To the Stars, and I have a current book out now called They Called Us Enemy, targeting the teenagers, because I as a teenager, I loved comic books, and so I told the story in comic book form. And believe it or not, They Called Us Enemy was banned in York, Pennsylvania, by these very insecure people who's insecure about our Americanism, and they feel somewhat inferiorized by American history. They should not be. What we're doing by knowing about American history with its darker chapters is to make us better than that, to try to be better Americans. And when these people went to the library board meeting and yell and scream, they feel that by the volume of their voices, they can dominate. And so because they yelled and screamed in enough volume, not in numbers, but just in volume, the library board decided, all right, well, let's quiet these people by banning my book, together with many other books. But fortunately, and I owe this to Star Trek fans, enough Star Trek fans had bought the book and read it, and they responded in strong numbers. And so the ban was taken away, and my book is a part of the library at York, Pennsylvania.
Thank you for asking that question. George, let's speak to your right.
Somewhat related. I'm so thrilled that you're able to share with us the versions of America you've seen, from some of the darkest days to some of the progress that we've made recently. When we see that progress start to go backward, what should people like us do? Is it about staying hopeful? Is it about being louder? Is it about taking action? What do you think is most important?
Well, when I was a teenager, I became very curious about my childhood imprisonment, and I had many after-dinner conversations with my father. And I feel truly blessed that I had a father who was willing to share with me his experience during our imprisonment. Many Japanese American parents of my father's generation that never did talk about it after the war, for understandable reasons, because it was so wounding, so painful, so hurtful that they didn't want to inflict that on their children, so they didn't discuss it. But my father did, and it's from my father that I learned about our democracy. He used to quote to me from Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, "Ours is a government of the people, by the people, and for the people." That's what makes our democracy great, a noble democracy. But, he said, therein also is our vulnerability, our fallibility, because people are human beings that make mistakes. And he felt even President Roosevelt, who was a great president, he respected President Roosevelt, but, and especially during the Depression, when this country was in the depth of an economic depression, people didn't have jobs, didn't have homes, were hungry, lining up in long lines for a bowl of soup. It was a horrible time when the spirit of this country was broken. And President Roosevelt needed to galvanize the people. And he told the people, there is nothing to fear but fear itself. And he did bring the economy up. But when Pearl Harbor was bombed, it was a devastating bombing. Over 2,400 people were killed. And Roosevelt, that great president, felt vulnerable because the west coast of America was just like Pearl Harbor. It was open, unprepared, and vulnerable. And so he got swept up by the hysteria in this country, the suspicion and fear and hate. And he signed Executive Order 9066, which ordered all Japanese Americans on the West Coast, approximately 125,000 people, to be summarily rounded up with no charge, no trial, no due process. In a trial, the accuser has to produce facts, evidence of the charges, to support the charges. And if you can't produce it, then there's no punishment. But in our case, there was no charge. So how could you have a trial with no charge? And so we were just rounded up forcibly by soldiers carrying rifles with bayonets on them, and we were imprisoned. And he said, that's why in a democracy, it's a citizen's responsibility to be actively engaged in the process. And he encouraged all three of us, his children, to be active in society. I was active in the student government at school. In middle school, I was a student body president. I became the president of the senior board in high school. And my father took me to my first presidential campaign, Adlai Stevenson Preston Campaign Headquarters. Most of you may not recognize that name, Adlai Stevenson. Oh, somebody does. He was a great governor of Illinois, and my father admired him. And when I heard his speeches too, he was inspiring. And So he taught me about democracy, and he taught me how important it is to be active participants in this. And that's why I urge all of you, whatever party you belong to understand the issues and actively participate. First of all, be a voter, but beyond that, be informed. Be an informed voter, and then volunteer for campaigns or candidates, and become really a responsible citizen of this country. And so that's why, again, my father is my hero. The actor that I admired when I was very young was Errol Flynn in The Adventures of Robin Hood, and that's where I got the idea of the fencing floor.
There you go. Bring it full circle. Thank you for that
Thank you.
question. Guys, we have time for one short question and one short answer. That means you, George. Thank you.
Yes, George, I'll keep this short. I can't guarantee you'll keep your answer short.
I will try.
You touched on the progress we've made when talking about your relationship with Brad, but with the states now passing a lot of laws against trans care, drag shows, and that, do you think we're going in the wrong direction now?
It is an eternal problem with our democracy. We have a history where this kind of movement happens periodically. Certainly with the LGBTQ community. When I realized that I was gay, first of all, I didn't know what the word gay meant, but I knew what I felt. And I thought Bobby Corral was so cute. Yes, such a sweet smile. And so, I kept it to myself. And then when you become much more mature, you become closeted. And you had fellow closeted people that you had relationships with. And so there were laws that prevented us from being visible and active. Gay bars were raided. People who enjoyed the mutual company and a bottle of beer was illegal. And police would raid gay bars, force everybody in that bar into a paddy wagon, take them to a police station, and fingerprint them, and take their pictures, and put their names on a list. That was terrifying. If any of that got out, you could lose your job, your career, maybe even your family. It was a horrible time, and that's what kept people closeted. And thanks to the boldness and the determination of the gay liberation people, and I was still closeted then after when you reach a certain point, things start evaporating. Your memory goes. The gay bar raid, Stonewall. I couldn't remember that. And that started the gay liberation movement. And because of them, things were starting to happen. And I was still closeted until 2005, when amazing things started to happen. Massachusetts got marriage equality, which came from the state Supreme Court, the judicial route. But in California, 2 years later, in 2005, the California legislature, the people's representatives, the Senate and the Assembly passed the marriage equality bill. It was a thrilling moment, and all that that was needed beyond that was the signature of the governor, one signature to make it legal. We had a governor at that time who was also a movie star, Arnold Schwarzenegger. When he ran for governor, he ran by saying, I'm from Hollywood. I've worked with gays and lesbians. I have friends who are gays and lesbians, creating the image that he really was supportive of the LGBTQ community. But when the marriage equality bill landed on his office, I was very skeptical. He was from the right wing of the Republican Party, and sure enough, he responded like a Republican right-winger, and he vetoed the bill. Marriage equality, that was approved by the elected officials, the Senate and the Assembly. I was raging mad, and that's what got me to come out for the first time and speak to the press as a gay man, and I blasted Schwarzenegger's veto. I was raging, and that's when I came out.
George, let's stop it there.
Yes. That was my short answer.
That was the short answer, yes. Come back tomorrow for the long one. Everybody give it up
Thank you,
for Mr.
George.
George Takei!